50% gains in a year, not too bad. I think most people are struggling now because they hear news about Trump tariffs or whatever and all this fear and noise in the market. But here's how I kind of weathered the storm, even though, I mean, you can see I went from like 80, 90% ish up on the year to now 54%. Not too bad, but here's how I did it, what stocks I bought, and my investment policies. So first thing I look at usually is the valuation of a company. I think that's like the most crucial thing when you're investing. People investing in Tesla 5 years ago, 4 years ago, haven't made much money because I mean at the time it sounded like a really good company, but when you looked at the valuation, it was insane. Another example is like Palantir right now. I was in that when it was in the 10, 12s, got out around 50-ish and it's blown up to 100, but I made my profit and I'm out of it. So apart from valuation, kind of linked to that is the earnings potential, where you want to look at how much a company is growing its net income year by year. And on the third point, longevity and resilience, how long they can keep doing that for, because it's no use if it's going for maybe 1, 2 years and then just like plateaus or flatlines, that company is not really going to do too well in 10 years time, which is the amount I want to hold most of my companies for, I would say. And then with that, you have resilience. So, when you have market downturns or recessions and all that, can these companies actually survive through that? Fourth point, leadership and management. I think a lot of companies it's not necessarily the idea, like that is a big point, but it's also the leadership and the management. So with Tesla, really great company, you have Elon Musk there. Apple, the biggest company for I don't know how long until just recently, Steve Jobs steering the company in the right direction. But yeah, those are the main things I look at. Just as an example, I'll bring you through my position with SoFi. I've been investing in this company for about a year now. As you can see, I got in around low sevens and it shot all the way up to 18. But after all that noise, it's back down to 13. But I kind of just want to bring you through why I invested in this, and this is my biggest holding. I think I've got 50% of my total portfolio in this one stock, so it's quite a high conviction play. But if we look at the reasons I bought it, this is kind of just the valuation part, but if we look at 2024 last year, they did 2.6 billion in revenue, growing 26% year over year from the previous year, and they had earnings per share of about 15 cents, which is, it's okay. I mean, these numbers don't mean a lot right now, but when you look at 2025, they're growing revenue 27%. Oh, that's the guided revenue at least. Guided EPS, 27 cents. So revenue's growing 27%, EPS is pretty much doubling earnings per share. And then if we look to 2026, which is the furthest that SoFi is guided for, revenue is going to be growing about 27% again. And EPS is going to about 55 cents or 80 cents, right? So that's more than doubling from the previous year. So the earnings are growing exponentially. When you look at their price to earnings multiple, if we just assign it a price to earnings multiple of 30, which is fair, I think the market average is about 20-ish right now, which is pretty high. But if you look at a company that's growing at close to 30%, earnings are doubling, and obviously they're not going to double forever, but they're growing pretty quick. I think 30 is a fair valuation to give SoFi. And if you multiply that by the EPS, so we'll take 80 cents because SoFi generally, they give really low guidance and they always beat it. If you look up SoFi and you just look at all their earnings and you look at how much they beat or missed like expectations or guidance by, they always beat. So they always guide really low. But if you multiply the 30 by the 80 cent EPS, you're going to get a price of about $24. And it's sitting at $13 now, and I was buying in the sevens. So that was my whole rationale of why I thought SoFi was a really good buy. Yeah, if we go back to these four things, valuation, obviously super cheap at 7 when I thought it was going to be about 24 in 2026. So check there. Earnings potential. Earnings are growing super rapid, and yeah, check there. Third, longevity, resilience. I think the CEO, Anthony Noto, mentioned that they're looking to be a top 10 financial institution. And if you know like the big banks and stuff in America, I think that's like 10x their market cap right now just to get to that point. And they're obviously going to keep pushing keep growing and keep innovating. And next, leadership management. Anthony Noto, he's got experience at Goldman Sachs, NFL, like he's done a bunch of stuff. and the management's they're always guiding lower and just massively beating. So, they're not over delivering. Yeah, that's the one. Management's really trustworthy. They've been doing so well these past few years, always beating on guidance. All right, let's look at my current holdings so far. I've only got 6 stocks at the moment: SoFi, Nubank, AMD, Block, previously known as Square. I don't know if you guys would have heard of that one. Shift4 Payments, PayPal. So 5 out of 6 of these are actually fintechs. And the reason why I'm so heavily invested in fintechs is because I think last year these just kind of went down the drain, and I looked at the valuations, I looked at the futures of these companies, and I thought it was massively underpriced. And I'm up on most of them, as you can see. Not massively. They're pretty new positions, except for SoFi and PayPal. PayPal I bought quite a while ago, and it went up to 90, and I was about 50% up on that, but it's dropped after all the tariffs and everything. Pretty much back to break even now. And I have AMD, which is an AI play. I would buy Nvidia as well. I just think that AMD's valuations, they're both low right now, to be honest. I wouldn't mind buying them. Just don't really have the money right now to buy it. But I added to AMD a month ago or something, and it's pretty much still at the same price. So we'll see in about a year or so where that is. But I think it's a really good company, similar to SoFi, growing steady revenue. Earnings are it's just spiking because of the whole AI thing right now, which I think is mostly sustainable from what I've seen so far. And yeah, looking to get into AMD. Hopefully the price goes down a bit more, and I'll be very happy to scoop some shares up. That's about it today. Yeah, in the future, let me know if you want me to make videos about how I value each of these companies specifically, more news about that. Today was just a quick run through, especially with SoFi being the only example. And there's so much more to consider that company. I think it's really, really great what Anthony Noto and management's doing, and they're really innovative and stealing a bunch of market share. They sponsored the golf event, TGL. I'm not sure if you guys would have seen that, but yeah, they're making some good moves, and I really like that company. And that's been my biggest gain because I just invested so heavily into that. That's the other thing. With investing, I find these companies that I like. I do a lot of research on them, make sure that all the boxes are checked, and I just keep investing until I'm happy with the position I have. So once I got to about half my portfolio, or even more than that, I kind of thought, it's okay. It's time to diversify a little bit, and I started adding these other positions, which I think are similar, high growth potential, really cheap valuations, low downside, all that. Yeah, that's all for today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening in. Have a good day.